You're standing in a crowd so tightly packed, you can't even lift your arms. It's cold. The air smells like damp stone, horse manure, sweat, and roasted chestnuts. You've been standing for hours in the Place de Grève, the central execution square of Paris, waiting for something truly spectacular. Not just a hanging, not just a beheading. No, today's going to be special. Today, a man is going to be torn apart by horses. You've heard about this punishment before. Everyone has. It's the most feared, the most brutal, and the rarest form of death the French justice system can offer. Reserved only for the worst of the worst, traitors to the king, regicides. And the man about to face it? Robert-François Damiens, a former servant, Catholic fanatic, a mentally unstable man who, in a moment of deluded glory, tried to stab King Louis XV with a penknife. The king survived with a scratch. Damiens would not be so lucky. The crime was minor. The punishment, however, would be legendary. You crane your neck for a better view. Nobles have rented windows in nearby buildings. Children are perched on shoulders. Hawkers shout as they sell wine and sausages. The mood is strangely festive. They say tens of thousands are here. And you believe it. This isn't just an execution. This is an event. But no one, not the executioners, not the king's guards, not even the condemned man himself, has any idea how wrong things are about to go. Let's rewind for a moment. Because the man you're about to watch die in the most horrifying way imaginable, he wasn't always history's most cursed criminal. Damiens was born in 1715. Ironically, the same year Louis XV became king. He was a low-level servant, drifting between households, fired repeatedly for being unreliable, erratic, and deeply religious in the worst possible way. He earned the nickname Robert the Devil. Charming. He wasn't political. He wasn't working for any grand conspiracy. He didn't have allies or funding or even a clear plan. What he had was a penknife and a delusion. On January 5th, 1757, Damiens approached the king outside Versailles, pulled out the tiny blade and stabbed him in the side. It didn't even pierce the ribcage. The king was startled, more annoyed than harmed. But in the world of divine right monarchies, stabbing the king even slightly isn't just treason. It's blasphemy. An attack on the very foundation of power and order. And for that, there could be only one punishment: to be torn limb from limb while still alive. For 2 months, Damiens sat in prison, and by sat we mean screamed through constant torture. He was burned with red-hot irons, pried open with tongs, had boiling wax, sulfur, and lead poured into his wounds. They wanted to know if he had co-conspirators. Spoiler, he didn't. They tortured him anyway, because they could. By the time March 28th arrived, he was no longer a man, just a bleeding half-mad, broken wreck being kept alive purely to suffer publicly. That morning, he was dragged to the scaffold in Place de Grève, tied to a wooden frame in front of a crowd that had waited since dawn. And waiting with him were 4 horses, one for each limb. But here's where things started to unravel. The horses? Not war horses, not muscular beasts trained for the task, just regular carriage horses. No one thought to bring the kind of muscle needed to rip a man apart. Even worse, the executioners weren't fully prepared either. Some of them had never carried out this kind of punishment before. Others were already queasy just looking at the prisoner. And Damiens was still conscious, barely, but aware. Aware enough to feel everything that was about to happen. The moment arrives. The executioner gives the signal. The 4 horses, each tied to a limb, are whipped simultaneously and told to run. The crowd surges forward, holding its breath. And then, nothing happens. Damiens' body doesn't budge. His limbs stretch. His torso tenses. He lets out a sound, part scream, part gurgle. But he stays in one piece. The horses try again, struggling to pull against the tension. Their hooves scrape against the wooden platform. One nearly falls. Still no dismemberment. Instead of a dramatic, swift punishment, the scene has become a grotesque farce. People in the crowd start murmuring. Nobles whisper to each other in confusion. Someone laughs nervously. Someone else vomits. This was supposed to be a powerful message from the king. This is what happens to traitors. Instead, it's a scene out of a nightmare that won't end. Over and over, the horses are whipped. Damiens' joints dislocate. His shoulders snap. His pelvis shifts unnaturally. Blood begins to leak from under the ropes. He screams, again and again. Still alive. Half an hour passes, then an hour, still alive, still whole. By now, you've been standing in the square for over an hour, watching a man get slowly torn apart, and not in the theatrical way you were promised, more like in the brutally awkward, horrifyingly real way that makes your stomach churn. And he's still alive, his limbs are grotesquely stretched. His joints are long since dislocated. His body is shaking. He's screaming, whispering, groaning. It's hard to tell anymore. The executioners huddle together. The horses clearly aren't strong enough. The crowd is turning restless. This is supposed to be a divine moment of royal justice, not this. Then someone gives the next command, bring the knives. You watch as assistants carry out long, hooked blades, some glowing red hot from the fire nearby. They're not for finishing Damiens off. No mercy here. They're going to start cutting his tendons manually. The idea: loosen the joints, slice through the sinew holding his limbs to his torso, so the horses don't have to work as hard. It's less like an execution, now, and more like a live autopsy. You can hear him moaning, whispering, Mon Dieu, pitié. My God, mercy. But mercy died a long time ago today. The surgeons, or rather butchers, start cutting. First the knees, then the armpits. Blood sprays, and the smell hits you before the wind even shifts. You weren't close enough to see clearly before. Now you can smell it. Burned skin, open flesh. The iron tang of blood his body thrashes. He's still conscious, still screaming and gasps now. They cut deeper, severs beneath the joints. Sinews pop, ligaments shred. The executioners shout for the horses again. Whips crack, hooves thunder. And this time, one arm rips free. A sudden wet tearing sound rips across the square. The crowd gasps, some cheer, but many flinch. You look and see it. Damien's arm still tied to the rope, bouncing behind the horse like some kind of gruesome prize. His body jolts. He's still moving, still screaming. It took nearly 2 hours to get this far. Now it's a race between the horses and what's left of the man. The second limb, his left leg, tears loose not long after. Blood fountains from the socket. Damiens flails, or what's left of him does. You can't believe he's still alive, but he is. How do you know? Because he's trying to speak. Witnesses say he was mumbling prayers even as his body came apart. Others say he screamed curses at the crowd. One guard said he begged them to finish it. The truth? No one knows exactly. But the screaming didn't stop. That part was clear. Third limb, his other arm, rips. Free after a few more minutes of cutting and pulling. The horses are exhausted. Their legs are shaking. Foam drips from their mouths. But Damiens? Still not dead. Now there's only one limb left, his right leg. Executioners switch ropes. The knives come back out. This time they don't even wait for the sinews to break naturally. They cut through the thigh, just to get it over with. Finally, the fourth limb is torn off. And at long, horrible last, Robert-François Damiens dies. But even his death is strange, because he didn't die with a scream, or with dignity, or with anything resembling peace. He just sort of stopped. Torso, torn in 4 directions, arms and legs gone, covered in blood, ash, and filth. His final breath didn't even make a sound. You stand there in the square, unsure what you're supposed to do now. No one cheers. The crowd that came to witness royal power looks shaken, sick, quiet. Someone faints. Someone else throws up behind you. People begin quietly filing away, their shoes squelching in the blood-soaked straw that covers the platform. You weren't supposed to feel this way. This was supposed to be justice, retribution, holy vengeance on a regicide. But it felt more like murder. Even the king's own officials look disturbed. Some turn away during the final tearing. Others can't bring themselves to look at the body, or what's left of it. What's worse, the priests who had come to read prayers stopped mid-sentence. They couldn't continue. Not even the clergy could find God in this mess. What happens to the body? Oh, it gets worse. His remains are burned on the spot right there on the scaffold. His ashes are scattered, not because it's symbolic, but because they want to erase him. They don't want a grave, a marker, a memory. But it's too late, because everyone who was here will never forget what they saw. You might think this is where the story ends, but Damien's execution did something unexpected. It didn't just punish a criminal, it shook the conscience of France. Voltaire, the Enlightenment, philosopher and legendary critic of religious and political Cruelty wrote about Damiens. He used the execution as evidence that the justice system was not divine, but barbaric. Other thinkers joined in. Philosophers, writers, even some nobles. They started asking hard questions. Was this justice? Was this necessary? Did watching a man suffer for 4 hours make the world safer? Or just bloodier? The answers were uncomfortable. Damiens' execution became a turning point. Not overnight, but slowly, steadily. France began moving away from public torture. Executions were still public, yes, but the brutal theatricality began to fade. And within a few decades, a new invention would change everything. The guillotine. Clean, swift, efficient, no horses required. By the time of the French Revolution, torture as punishment had become a symbol of the old regime, the very thing the revolution sought to destroy. And Robert-François Damiens? He became a ghost in the story, a grim reminder of just how far power will go when it feels threatened. So what was the point of all this? What did we learn from the most cursed execution in history? That power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it carries a whip, or a knife, or a rope tied to 4 horses. And sometimes, when that power is used too brutally, too publicly, it doesn't scare people. It wakes them up. Robert-François Damiens stabbed a king, but in the end it was the justice system, not the monarchy, that looked fragile. His death didn't inspire loyalty. It didn't teach obedience. It didn't even make people feel safe. It made them feel sick. And in the centuries that followed, the world slowly realized that spectacle isn't justice. Suffering doesn't equal strength. And if a system needs this kind of horror to survive, maybe it doesn't deserve to. You came here for the story of a cursed execution. What you got was a glimpse into the moment when the mask slipped and the crowd stopped clapping. And history never forgot.